Hello, I'm Dr. George Cressman. I'm the staff historian here at the Camp Landing Museum. And we most appreciate that you're watching this video, a continuing series of videos on Camp Landing's history during World War II. And in this video, we're going to be talking about a special variation of the Sherman tank that was used for amphibious invasions. I'm standing in front of Camp Landing's Sherman tank. And although this tank was not used as an amphibious tank, I wanted you to get a sense for what the Shermans were and how they were used during World War II. So the Sherman tank was the main battle tank used by both the British and U.S. Army. Over 70,000 of these tanks were produced during World War II. There's a special variant of this particular tank that was used in World War II. It was called the DD, or duplex drive Sherman tank. The troops called it the Donald Duck tank for the DD. World War II was full of amphibious invasions. Everywhere the Allies had to go required an amphibious invasion. But amphibious invasions require or present a unique set of challenges. One of the most critical challenges is the lack of heavy gunfire early on in the invasion for the landing troops. The normal source of heavy gunfire in the Army is artillery. But in early phase of an amphibious invasion, artillery is not available. Artillery must be transported to the beach and then suitable firing positions determined. Activities which are very difficult to do under heavy enemy gunfire. So the Allies determined that they would use tanks as a substitute for traditional artillery pieces. But this meant, because these were all amphibious invasions, this meant the tanks had to swim from their landing craft to the beach. The Allies solved that problem by developing methods to float the tanks, along with a special conversion to provide propulsion. The Allies turned to the British General Percy Hobart for the design of a swimming tank. The swimming DD, duplex drive Donald Duck tank, was part of a special group of tanks often referred to as Hobart's Funnies. So Hobart's Funnies were tanks modified for special purposes. For example, the bobbin tank could lay down a mat across sand to allow vehicles to cross that sand or areas of soft soil. Or an arc tank carried a bridge superstructure that could be used to provide passage over an anti-tank ditch or a creek. Or a flail tank with its rotating drum and chains could be used to clear a path through an enemy minefield. One of the Hobart's Funnies was the swimming, or DD, duplex drive tank. The DD tank shown in this slide is on display in the Bovington, England Tank Museum. The Allies' DD tank design was invented by the Hungarian Nicholas Stroessler. Stroessler's design provided temporary flotation for the tank. A tubular framework was attached to the tank just above the tank's tracks. The framework was raised or lowered using air pressure. A heavy rubberized canvas was then attached to the tubular frame. Raising the tubular framework with the attached rubberized canvas formed a hull around the tank. The compressed air in the tubes that raised the hull provided upward pressure, which in turn floated the tank. Propulsion was provided by a set of propellers at the rear of the tank. These were driven by a connection to the idler rolls in the tank's tracks. To provide steerage, the propellers had a special gearing mechanism that allowed the propellers to swing from side to side. A tank crew member stood inside the flotation framework, serving as a helmsman of sort, using a shaft connected to the propeller's gearing. While the tank was swimming, the tank's driver, assistant driver, and gunner remained inside the tank, so they would be ready for action when the tank reached the beach. When the tank reached shallow water, the tank switched from propeller propulsion to movement by the tank's tracks, and the flotation, tubular framework, and the canvas was blown off the tank by a small set of explosive charges. During World War II, the British converted a total of 693 tank conversions to duplex drive on the M4A2 Sherman tank model and the M4A4 Sherman tank model. The U.S. Army converted 76 M4A1 Sherman tanks, as the Camp Landing Museum tank is, converted 76 of those M4A1s to the DD configuration. Here's the launch of a duplex drive tank. Prior to launch, the crew mounts the tank, raises the flotation frame and canvas. The tank engine is then started, the landing craft doors are then opened, and the tank drives off the landing craft's ramp. As soon as the tank is in the water, the drive system is switched to the propellers and the tank swims to shore. When the tank grounds in shallow water, the tank drive is switched to the tank's tracks. The tank drives onto the shore and the flotation framework is blown off. Here's a view of the rear of the tank with the flotation screen in place. Note the two propellers driven from the idler rolls of the tank's tracks. Here's a view of a tank that has reached the shore and lowered its flotation system. The flotation system, however, has not yet been blown off of the tank. The greatest use of DD tanks by the U.S. Army was in the amphibious assault on Normandy on 6th of June, 1944. You will recall that the invasion was to have occurred on 5 June, but stormy weather forced a one-day postponement. In this chart, you see the planned and actual use of DD tanks in the Normandy invasion. The seas were still rough from the storm that had delayed the invasion. Utah Beach, the westernmost beach, was somewhat protected from the rough seas, and its launch of 28 tanks went relatively well, with 27 of the planned 28 tanks reaching the beach. But on Omaha Beach, the tanks designated for support of the 1st Infantry Division was a disaster, with 27 of the 29 launch tanks sinking. The problem was that those tanks were launched too far offshore. The planned launching site was 5,000 yards off the beach, much too far out. The seas were still very rough. Fortunately, on Omaha Beach, the U.S. Navy, in a daring action, was able to provide gunfire support for the soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division. But also on Omaha Beach, note that the tanks designated to support the 29th Division on Omaha were not launched at sea, but were delivered directly to the beach, ensuring the survival of all of those tanks. The seas the British troops on Gold Beach faced were as rough as those off Omaha Beach. Here the Royal Navy did not launch its tanks at sea, but transferred them directly to the beach. On Juno Beach, the Royal Canadian Navy took the tanks much farther inland or inshore before launching, and a good number of their tanks actually reached the beach. And finally, on Sword Beach, the last of the British beaches, the seas were somewhat calmer, allowing a reasonably successful launch. The point is that while the DD tanks were indeed capable of handling moderate seas and swimming to shore, they were unsuitable for some of the heavy seas that the Normandy invasion delivered. Thanks so much for watching this video, joining us for this discussion of the Sherman DD, or duplex drive, swimming tanks. Please check the Camp Landing YouTube channel for other videos about the Camp Landing Museum and our history here. And please come visit us. We're open every day from noon to 4. For the museum staff, for our dedicated group of volunteers, this is Dr. George Cressman signing off.